Muslims believe the Quran to be the word of God as dictated to the Prophet Muhammad, while most Christians and Jews understand their holy texts to be authored by men inspired by God. This distinction means that critical analysis of the sacred texts, which has so enlightened Christian and Jewish thinking since the 16th century, becomes an extremely sensitive issue when it's applied to the Quran. And it doesn't help when those scholars who are making the attempt are largely Western non-Muslims. Can their studies really shed new light on the text and its origins? In 1972, during the restoration of the Great Mosque of Sana'a, capital of North Yemen, workers discovered a mash of old parchments in a loft between the inner and outer roofs. The entire load was stuffed into some 20 potato sacks, where it might have remained were it not for the arrival 7 years later of Dr. Geert Puin, a German scholar and Quranic expert. Puin immediately grasped the significance of the find. Working with a team of local assistants, he carefully prized the layers apart and fired off thousands of photographs. 4 fragments immediately caught Puin's attention. They contained the first and last chapters of the Quran, and unlike any other Qurans in existence, they were illustrated with architectural drawings of mosques. A vital clue to their origin.
Man kann eben diesen Koran,
because of its drawings, because of the art historical context, you can date this Quran very precisely to the time of Al-Walid.
sehr genau datieren auf die Zeit von Al-Walid. Das heißt
This is the reign between 705 and 715.
5 und 715.
The oldest datable Quran in the world, created some 70 years after the death of the Prophet. From the potato sacks, Puin identified fragments from nearly 1,000 different Qurans. Comparisons between them and the standard Cairo text in use today are startling. These early texts are written in a kind of shorthand with no vowel markings or distinguishing dots, which means that individual words can have up to 30 different meanings.
Es ist tatsächlich so, dass man durch die schiere Existenz
The sheer existence of so many different possible readings would suggest that this text wasn't passed down word for word.
der Text eben nicht wortwörtlich überliefert
The text isn't as stable as it seems in the Cairo version.
in der Fassung von Kairo erscheint.
There was another important discovery amongst the Sana'a fragments. The application of simple forensic techniques revealed earlier texts that had been washed off and overwritten. Although the hidden text revealed no contradictory meanings, words had been changed, verses and whole chapters rearranged.
If his researches are correct, particularly on dating, it suggests, in fact, that the Quran was not a single product, a single entity that was fixed by 650, but actually developed much, much later, hence the overlaying of texts or written materials.
None of this phases Islamic scholars, past and present. They are adamant that the integrity of the text has been preserved through a strong oral tradition, and if differences occur in earlier written versions, they say these are due to regional and colloquial variations of the same words and phrases.
We accept that there is a diversity from the very beginning on very marginal things. It's not changing first the central message of the Quran, the pillars of our faith.
In 2001, another German study caused such outrage that all mention of it was banned in some Islamic countries. A book appeared written by an expert in early Semitic languages. It was so controversial that the author published under a pseudonym and will only speak on condition that his identity remains concealed.
So gesehen ist es unbedingt erforderlich, den Koran neu zu lesen.
In order to understand it correctly, we need a fundamentally new interpretation and reading of the Quran.
Dr. Marcus Gross helped to translate the book from its original German into English and is willing openly to express the author's views.
Es wurde schon gesagt, 20%, ich würde sagen 25%.
About a quarter or a fifth of the Quran contains unintelligible words or words which don't make real sense. That number can be vastly reduced with a knowledge of Syriac to, let's say, 5%.
Syriac or Syrio-Aramaic had become one of the dominant languages of Christian liturgy by the 3rd century. Christ spoke Aramaic, and it can still be heard in remote Christian communities like this town of Malula in Syria. But at the time of Muhammad, Syrio-Aramaic was the major written and cultural language of the whole region. Written Arabic was in its infancy.
Wir haben bis zum Koran einige Inschriften.
There are pre-Islamic inscriptions in Arabic, very short texts, but the first real book written in Arabic is the Quran.
But you're saying the Quran is written in 2 languages.
Ja, ich würde sagen, es gibt ja kaum eine Kultursprache.
In many areas in the world, languages mix constantly, all the time.
Denn
to make it understandable to a speaker of English, you have to go back about 1,000 years. Imagine the Anglo-Saxon peasant talking to his master, who was a Norman and spoke a mixed language of French and an Anglo-Saxon. And you could only understand that mixed language with a knowledge of both.
Muslim scholars of the past had the confidence to acknowledge foreign words in the Quran. In the 10th century, Al-Tabari, one of the most respected commentators, identified Hebrew, Latin, Greek, Persian, Abyssinian, and Syriac words. The difference, though, is that Luxemburg is claiming new meanings that have never been suggested before. How can one German professor challenge the collective judgment of more than 1 billion people, and on what basis? What method does he use?
Ich bin natürlich bemüht, zunächst einmal eine arabische Lesung und eine arabische.
Whenever I try to find a solution for an unclear passage, the first step is to try to find an overlooked meaning of an Arabic word which is not used today, but which can be found in old dictionaries, something that the commentators didn't consider. Only if that is not possible, I take into consideration the meaning of the root, of the corresponding root in Syriac, or a possible misreading. Misreading in this case means that the undotted text was dotted wrongly. Then there's also the possibility that a Syriac letter was by mistake written within an Arabic text.
Using these methods, Luxemburg examined some of the most obscure passages of the Quran. After Mary has given birth to Jesus, in the Arabic Quran, the archangel says to her, "Be not sad, your Lord has placed a little river beneath you." In Luxemburg's version, "Be not sad, your Lord has made your delivery legitimate." And there are other highly contentious examples. God's command to a skeptic in Arabic, "Look at your food and drink, look at your ass," becomes "Look at your condition and look at your overall state." At the end of the world, the earth steps forward in Arabic. In Syriac, the earth splits open. Plausible to some, but do any of these changes affect the central precepts of Islam? Or is Luxemburg just adding a little poetic color here and there?
Was soziale Gepflogenheiten angeht, wie zum Beispiel...
It's certainly not key precepts like the existence of God or afterlife, which is challenged by my interpretation, but many everyday customs. One example is the veil. The Quranic verse adduced to prove their position talked about humur, which had to be beaten on the pockets. The sentence was a bit obscure. It's usually rendered that it means cover your head and your cleavage. And if you have a look at the chador, the veil in Iran, for example, that's exactly what is covered.
Aramäisch Gmar. dann verstehe ich ein Gürtel.
But with my Syriac interpretation of the verse, my translation is, put your belt around your hips. And the belt was a sign of chastity, also especially used by monks. So that makes it much more meaningful.
But Luxemburg's interpretation of paradise causes the greatest offense. In the Iranian city of Isfahan, there's a 17th century palace built to represent the gates of heaven. The cool greens of the gardens beyond express the longings of a desert people and are beautifully described in the Quran, along with flowing fountains and the favors of huris, usually understood as wide-eyed virgins. One commentary, but not the Quran, even specifies numbers, 72 for each righteous man. But that doesn't sit well with 7 verses of the Quran that promise the righteous eternal contentment with their wives. Luxemburg believes he has resolved this contradiction.
Mit weiß großäugigen Huris verheiraten.
There is one passage in the Quran dealing with the Huris in which it says, وَزَوَجْنَاهُمْ بِحُورَ عِينٍ. We have paired them with dark, wide-eyed maidens. That is the traditional understanding of this verse. If you put the dots on the undotted text a little bit differently, what comes out is, we will make you comfortable under white, crystal-clear grapes.
For the suicide bomber, then, not the prospect of 72 virgins in paradise, but in Luxemburg's interpretation, a modest bunch of grapes.
German study, as far as I'm concerned, is very Christian-centric. It's influenced by the way Bible has been researched and put together. Bible and the Quran are not the same.
It is the connection Luxemburg makes with Christian symbolism that is highly inflammatory to many, but a persuasive argument to others. This 5th century fresco in an Egyptian monastery depicts the archangels receiving souls in paradise. Each archangel holds a grape in one hand, and in the other cradles the departed souls, who are refreshed with bunches of grapes. The grape motif is repeated in the vestments of the priests of the Syrian Orthodox Church, all relating back to Christ's promise to his disciples at the Last Supper that he will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until he is reunited with them in his Father's kingdom.
If foreign words were in the Arabic dictionary at the time of the Prophet, surely they had evolved into an Arabic meaning. So that particular word, even if it is Syriac, must be understood in the way the Arabs understood them. Not as grapes, but as hur, partners in heaven.
I think we all understand that it's symbolic, that we have to go beyond the images and the way we look at the paradise, for example. You know, we are not asked to think of this on, you know, in a literal way. This is what is. We don't know. It's just for us a description of what is going to be beautiful beyond your imagination.
Although Luxemburg's work has been called into question by leading academics and is controversial by its very nature, he believes it opens a door, encouraging linguists, archaeologists and historians to use modern tools to throw further light on the text and its context. For some Muslim scholars, that is in the Quranic spirit of free inquiry and no threat to those who are robust in their faith.
This research by Luxemburg and his colleagues doesn't undermine any of the basic tenets, teachings or principles of Islam. What it does, though, is to provide interesting questions. And we as thinking Muslims, as people of the 21st century, that we should say, yes, let's look at what he's providing. And let's not just condemn, but let's also see if this research has a historical base or is it a product of European Orientalism.